Hey, what's up, everybody? And thank you for listening to Operation Agency Freedom, where we are bringing you top secret advice from the world's most badass agency owners. These amazing men and women are sharing their stories of how they have built 6, 7, and 8-figure digital agencies and how you can too. My name is Chris Martinez, CEO of Dude, where we help digital agencies by giving them the people and the processes so that they can take on more projects and scale profitably. And I'm very, very excited about today's guest because Liz, our producer, got an email from this dude saying that he was in the CBD industry running an agency. Liz came to me and was like, we got to have this guy on the show. And I'm like, hell yes. So I am very excited to bring to you Chris Shreeve, co-founder of PrograMetrix. What's up, Chris? How's it going, man?
Hey, I got a lot to live up to. That was a heck of an intro. So really excited to
Well,
chat all things marketing, advertising, agency, and a little cannabis and CBD.
yeah, absolutely, man. So we're going to get all into your agency story. And I normally our roundtable discussion is something a little bit like unrelated to the business. But I mean, dude, you work in weed. And so I had to tie in this conversation into our roundtable discussion. And so, like I said, we're going to get into the agency stuff in a second, but you were never you never grew up as like you weren't a pothead, you weren't really into weed. And now you're running an agency. So, kind of what was your upbringing, or what was like your perception of marijuana when you were like growing up as a kid?
I mean, for me, it was, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, obviously very, progressive area, West
Yep.
Coast, where,
Yep.
medical cannabis was fairly pervasive, right? And so for the most part, the assumption was, you smoked, cannabis for medicinal purposes. And if you didn't have a need for it, you didn't really smoke it. For me, funny story. I mean, I never consumed cannabis for years, even past college, and it's just not something that I was very interested in. But my brother actually was in the medical marijuana business for 8+ years, dating back to when you could only really sell medical marijuana at farmers markets.
Right.
And so that was way before the big cannabis and CBD boom of the last few years. So, I told my brother, I said, hey, being a Seattle sports fan, we don't get very many great winning championship experiences. So the Seattle Seahawks win the Super Bowl, I'll smoke with you. And a couple years later, won the Super Bowl, and that was my first experience into it. So it's been a really interesting family story. Also, kind of the cultural dynamic of medical marijuana in the Pacific Northwest and on the West Coast. That's kind of led me to really understanding a lot about the plant and a lot about the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and how my marketing and advertising expertise could, bring value to companies that are trying to grow in this industry.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I was born in 1980. So I grew up in the 80s, and then was there from the beginning of the Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan DARE program. And so I don't know if you went through this, but DARE was a middle school program. They say, just say no, right? And it's like one of the biggest failures of social programs in the history of the world. And so you were always kind of taught that like drug dealers were like these super shady people that were like hiding in the corners, and they would get you addicted to drugs and like all these bad things. And I ran with a pretty like a bad crowd when I was in middle school. So like the first time I smoked weed, I was only 13. And we were like the little gangbanger kids and whatever. And I actually got tired of weed by the time I got to end of high school. So I went to college, and I went to college in Santa Barbara, where like, talk about weed capital. I mean, all colleges are like weed capitals, but like just like literally you walk down the street and you can smell weed on the streets from all the people that are smoking. And so like while all my friends who had not smoked as early as I did went to college, and then they would just became like massive potheads. And then they got really into it, and I was just kind of like over it. So I've never really been like a big weed guy. I have nothing against it. I feel like, especially like we both kind of have cancer experiences. And if somebody's going through cancer and that helps them, by all means, just let them have it. Right. But it is really, really interesting, the cultural impact that legalizing marijuana has had not just from a business standpoint, but also just like the perception, right? So like Pacific Northwest, California, always been somewhat progressive, and now the legalization is starting to spread throughout more states. Have you seen in like your circle where people are more accepting of marijuana as a medicinal as well as a recreational fun thing to do?
Yeah, I think the progression in different states is really interesting. You know, a lot of states now are legalizing medical, and then they jump right into recreational and you know legal over the counter. But you know, in Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and even California, we had years where the medical marijuana industry was pervasive, and you knew that a lot of people were able to purchase it not on the black market, but compliantly through a green card. And so, it wasn't as abnormal. I'm always curious talking to consumers in the South who are just getting CBD approved,
Yeah,
who can now buy CBD at a gas station, and, what their perception is, or in the Midwest or ports on the East Coast that haven't even had medical marijuana. Now they have access to CBD and creams and roll-ons for your back and all sorts of different components. It
right.
must be a bit of a shock to now have access. It's kind of like going through, like individuals went through prohibition,
Yeah,
back in the day. But I think what we're trying to do in the in the advertising space is to market the positive effects,
right.
and to make sure that people know that even though it's a Schedule One drug in the eyes of the federal government, which is still crazy to me that that's still a thing. Um,
Add it to the
that
list.
yeah, yeah, sure. That that there are a ton of really positive medical benefits, and we see it on a daily, weekly basis. People that come into my family's dispensaries and share stories of the great products that were recommended to them. So, I'm hopeful that in the next few years, more states will have access to the plant, and that we'll be able to do it responsibly, and that business component and legalization will also help some of the kind of cultural injustices that have been kind of brought upon
Yep.
individuals who were in the cannabis industry 5, 10, 20 years ago, when it was looked at in a different light.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this before we jumped on, and I want to touch upon it really quickly. Is that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are locked up for the exact things that are legal today. And that's very, very frustrating, especially for the minority community, because overwhelmingly, and there's comedians who joke about this, where weed's always been legal if you're white. But if you were darky, if you were brown like me, or African American, like you were going to jail for even just having, $20 worth of weed, which is insane. And so it is definitely, it's a hot button issue for people who know others who've been incarcerated because of drug charges, especially for marijuana. And you were telling me that there is a movement within the legalized marijuana industry and CBD industry to try and help a lot of those people. Can you talk about that really quickly?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. You start to get into politics and business, and there's a lot of different ways in which certain movements are forwarded. But a lot of states on the West Coast, particularly Colorado, even Washington,
Hmm.
governors are commuting sentences
Right.
that were levied years ago for minor drug charges.
Yeah.
That's a great start, right?
Yeah.
But there's more that needs to be done. There are individuals who have been serving 20 plus years for having a minor amount of marijuana on them.
Yeah.
And yet there are publicly traded companies, across our country and up north in Canada that are selling, tons, literal tons
Yep.
of marijuana and building $100 million businesses. So I think the interesting thing that's going to happen, and not to get too much down a rabbit hole, but obviously a lot of local governments are facing deficits right now.
Hmm.
One great way to drive tax revenue is legalizing marijuana,
Yeah,
legalizing
absolutely.
cannabis. And so
Absolutely.
you may see this snowball effect, right? Where, oh, well, now local governments need additional, tax revenue.
Right.
Let's look to cannabis. Then cannabis gets federally legalized. It gets descheduled as a drug. And then you start to see the snowball effect that hopefully culminates in righting some of the cultural and societal wrongs that have, that have stemmed from cannabis being a illegal or illicit drug over the years.
Yeah, I love it, man. Actually, there's this show on Netflix right now. It's called Immigration Nation, and it talks about people who are trying to immigrate to the United States. But there's also an episode of people who were born in another country, mainly Mexico. They are brought to the United States when they're children, like 2 years old. They grow up. They actually serve in the military, and then they get caught for whatever. Sometimes it's just having a joint, and they get deported for life. They served and fought in Iraq war, like all these crazy conflicts that we've had, and for whatever reason the government says no, now you got to go and you can't come back. And so like my offices or my operations are mainly located here in Tijuana, and there's like lots and lots of military veterans who are just trying to get back home. It's a great documentary, and I think the episode where they talk about it is like the 5th episode in the series. So really, really cool. You should check it out.
Yeah, I will. And like I said, it's unfortunate with government policies sometimes, but hey, if it's going to take the tax benefits of legalizing marijuana to help with all of these other systemic issues that are going on,
Yep.
By all means, let's make it happen, and let's
Weed
try
to
to
the
make
rescue.
it happen sooner
Weed to the
rather than
rescue.
later.
Awesome, man. So let's talk about your agency. I am really, really interested because when I was working with small businesses, we did have a couple of dispensary clients, and this is 5 years ago. So the technology and just everything in general, the landscape has changed quite a bit since then. But the challenge has always been driving traffic, right? And I heard you on a previous podcast talking about how the options were so limited. Like you had like weed maps and banner display ads, and that was pretty much it. And now, from what I understand, there's so much more out there. And so I want everybody who's listening to this episode to learn from you that when one door opens, there is another door that opens, or you can find a window to crawl through to make it work. So let's talk about, programmatrix, and like basically just give us the quick elevator pitch of what it is that you guys do. And then why don't you tell us how you're helping companies in the CBD industry?
Yeah, we're a programmatic advertising agency, and programmatic essentially just means the automation of media planning and buying across the web. So we are focused on campaign execution, optimization, data analysis of all digital advertising campaigns across the web, whether it be paid search in Google, social media advertising in Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then more broadly across the web through display, banner advertising, mobile, video, native, and even now, new emerging channels like streaming audio and streaming TV.
Mm-hmm.
The problem in the cannabis and CBD space is that the duopoly, Google and Facebooks of the world, still deem cannabis as an illicit drug.
Right.
So therefore, you can't leverage the 2 top advertising technology platforms in the world if you're a cannabis brand.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find other channels. And now, because of the normalization of cannabis and CBD, large mainstream websites, apps, and platforms are all approving cannabis and CBD advertising. So if you're on USA Today or Huffington Post or Barstool Sports or Complex Magazine, you may start to see cannabis and CBD ads. And so as this industry becomes to be a bit more normalized across the country, more and more publishers with advertising inventory are approving cannabis and CBD marketing. So it's our mission at programmatrix to bring mainstream advertising technology to cannabis and CBD brands, because we feel like they deserve the right to have access to the same technologies that our mainstream, CPG and retail and e-commerce counterparts have access to.
Good. Awesome. And so really quickly, because I'm not like super technical into the digital advertising space, programmatic advertising, like how does it work? Like what are the things that you guys are actually doing to get placement?
So the technologies that are used in the programmatic advertising world aggregate all of these sites, apps, and platforms, and all
Mm-hmm.
of their advertising inventory into one tool.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives us as media planners and buyers the ability to find the right audiences and the right sites, apps, and platforms, the online ad inventory, and blending them together so that we're reaching, we've all heard this, right? The right consumer on the right device at the right time.
Right, right.
And so that's what we really focus on, is using technology to find the right consumers who are potentially in market for CBD, looking to purchase cannabis, maybe are wellness enthusiasts, yoga enthusiasts, maybe it's someone who has back pain, chronic stress, those types of signals. We try to find those consumers online, and through technology, serve ads in real time to consumers while they browse content online.
And so like the actual ads that you're running, I mean, you there are restrictions, right? You can't run an ad with a dude holding a joint, like, right? It's like you have to operate within the rules.
Yeah, I mean, just like the cannabis industry as a whole, every state has their own rules and regulations.
Okay.
The majority of the compliance question around cannabis advertising is ensuring that a higher proportion of your audience is 21 plus or higher. In some states, it might be 70% plus. In others, it might be 50 or
Mm-hmm.
20 or 30.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to be compliant, federally, and to be able to advertise, so that you're not marketing to consumers that are underage, you have to make sure that you use age gating. So guarantee that you're only serving, ads to 21 plus, and on sites that have a overwhelming majority of consumers that are, of age to consume the products that we're marketing.
Gotcha. So, I mean, you started this from nothing, bootstrapped, and now you guys are growing and scaling. Why CBD? Why cannabis? Why did you decide that that was the one that was going to be your niche? Because it seems like from the outside looking in, I mean, it seems like a really, really difficult niche to try and break into because of all the regulations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in the first few years of our agency, we were growing organically.
Mm-hmm.
My business partner and I had been through a couple of, acquisitions where we were on the sales team. We started to see, a business evolve, and our expertise evolve. And we thought, hey, let's niche and not be a full service agency, but let's be a programmatic agency. We had a lot of success, but the reality is there's a lot of digital advertising agencies out there. There are a lot of consultants, thousands, in fact.
Thousands, tens of thousands. Trust
Yeah.
me, I know. I have a list.
So, yeah. So, so we looked at, different industries that we were finding success in. And because of my family ties and ownership of the dispensaries in Seattle, and because of this just boom in the industry, we really wanted to be a bigger fish in a small pond. We could have continued to be this programmatic or digital advertising agency for everyone, but we really wanted to focus a lot of our content, our sales efforts, our thought leadership in cannabis and CBD. We started doing so over 2 years ago. And sometimes in business, timing is everything. And the fact that you have more states legalizing, now we're starting the conversation about federal legalization. COVID-19 has also sparked a big conversation around cannabis being an essential business
Yep.
that's been allowed to stay open through a global pandemic.
I love that.
So
It's
the,
so
the
ironic.
the timing of all of it, we timed it right, and some would say we lucked out with kind of all these stars aligning.
So what are the next steps for you guys? Like, what are some of the things that are on the horizon for your agency that you're really excited about?
Well, anytime you go into a new vertical, a highly regulated industry, um, it's our belief that you have to start with education. You really need to double down on content, on explaining the values of your product or service before you start getting into the heavy sales pitches. It took us probably 6 months, starting in the cannabis and CBD space, before we started seeing much traction.
Hmm.
Brands didn't know what programmatic was. They didn't believe that they could advertise online. And so, really starting with more of an educational or consultative, um, a foundation was what really allowed us to kind of plant our flag as a leader in cannabis and CBD advertising. And so, continuing to double down on that, continuing to educate, push the envelope of what's possible. And we've certainly failed along the way, but we have to pave our own path in cannabis and CBD advertising. We have to, in some ways, create the market, when really 2 years ago there wasn't one. So a lot of trial and error, but I think with the importance of digital advertising becoming even more valued today, when people are at home ordering food from their couches, not wanting to go to retail stores, um, really just making sure that cannabis and CBD brands have the right tools to reach their audience and help their companies grow through a fairly uncertain time for many businesses. Our key is to just continue to double down and continue to educate and let brands know that there are options for them, and that they can leverage technology to build their business. Um, as they see companies shutting down and industries completely on hold, it's really a time to double down for these brands, and to, I hate to say capitalize on our current situation, but the spotlight has never been brighter on cannabis and CBD than it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, is there a lot of competition in your space are there a lot of other agencies that are doing something similar to you?
I think that there are, that there are companies that, we say, trying to capitalize on the green rush. Um,
I like it.
it's agencies that see the opportunity. Cannabis is a unique beast. The cannabis consumer, a lot of them still buy on the black market, and in the legal market. A lot of consumers don't want their neighbors to know that they go to dispensaries. There is still a lot of kind of gray area in the space.
Hmm.
So a lot of the big agencies out there haven't really dipped their toes into cannabis and CBD yet. Maybe for an issue with their larger enterprise type clients who don't want to be associated with an agency that is supporting cannabis or CBD brands.
Mm.
That's still something I hear quite a bit of. So, I think that we're early, but we're starting to see a lot more competition. We're starting to see a lot more companies, enter the industry. But you can pick out those that don't know what cannabis is. They don't know what CBD is. They don't know the industry. They don't know how to communicate with the business owners. Cannabis is perceived as this multi-billion-dollar industry, but it's generally comprised of small business owners and mom and
Right.
pop retail stores and families, sole proprietors that are creating businesses. So it takes a real understanding of the industry, to garner trust from these brand owners that are skeptical of the mainstream coming in and kind of cannibalizing the industry.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, and that's actually, it's relatable to pretty much any niche, right? It's like a lot of people, everybody has heard the importance of niching, and I know that you've gone through Jason Swank's program, and he's all about niching down,
Mhm.
but you know, you really do have to understand the customer, and that's one of the benefits of when you niche, is that you get really good at understanding their problems, and that's when you can usually get to a point where you can start to scale pretty quickly. But you do have to understand the lingo. You have to understand the culture. And I think that you also have to have a very relatable story to why you care about working with these types of people. For example, like in my industry, I started an agency. I know all the challenges that people have with trying to find talent. And that's basically why we created Dude, so that we could solve those people and process problems that agencies have with being able to get their work done. With you, like, I love the fact that your family has owned, I don't know how many dispensaries, but at least one dispensary. You also have the connection of how cannabis has helped your father to overcome cancer, which is like, I mean, you can't make that up. And all that is really, really powerful when it comes to helping you tell your story. Like, did you know that this was going to help you? Did you know that this was going to help you grow your agency, or did you kind of learn this along the way, that your story and your relationship to the industry would also translate into agency success?
Well, I think we really started to understand that there was an opportunity because we were running our own marketing programs, digital marketing programs for our dispensaries. And so we started to get, consumers coming in who, old ladies who would come in and say, I saw your ad on USA Today and I didn't know that cannabis brands could advertise. So
Yeah.
I'd never seen a cannabis ad. So I clicked on it and I decided to come into the store. And then you started to see all the vendors, right? All the products on the shelves. They were getting targeted with our ads.
Right.
And they start saying, how are you doing this? I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
talk to the company so it did happen a little bit organically, but we knew and we know that the cannabis industry is fairly close knit. There are a lot, like I said, a lot of small businesses that have been doing this for a long time. That this is their one chance to build a business, and they want to work with an agency and a partner that they can trust, that that they know what they're going through.
Yep.
And so my case study, if you will, was being in the industry and having firsthand experience, as to how digital marketing can improve, site traffic, online awareness, sales through online menus or delivery systems or e-commerce. So living and breathing it, as a marketer for our own stores and our own companies, I think was the initial validation that we really needed in order to decide to really go all in, in this exciting industry.
That's awesome, man. And I think, just if nothing else, I commend you on just being bold, right? Just, having the balls to just go for it, which it's not easy, right? And you've been able to, build a pretty, from what I can tell, pretty successful agency doing some really cool stuff. So, we're just about out of time. Chris, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Big fan of LinkedIn. I encourage everybody to find me, Chris Shreeve, at PrograMetrix. LinkedIn is where I spend a good portion of my life, not just my day.
Nice.
So I'd love to connect with other agency owners, brands in the space, just to talk shop. You could also reach out through our website, which is programmatrix.com. But would love to connect with anyone that wants to expand on this conversation, learn a little bit more about this crazy vertical we play in. And I appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk about my experiences and growing an agency and taking that difficult dive into a highly regulated space. So I appreciate the time.
Yeah, for sure. Who would be the perfect person to reach out to you today?
I think the perfect prospect for us is a cannabis or CBD brand that's trying to navigate the rules and regulations of of the industry, that want a partner that has been in the space, and that knows how to navigate different tools that can bring value to your marketing program. So I would also say we do work with a handful of agencies who want to outsource digital campaign management, who are maybe not totally understanding of the space. They want to leverage, another agency partner that they can outsource campaign management to, but they they do have clients or contacts or interests in the industry, other agency owners that are, keen on driving new revenue by adding cannabis and CBD as a new vertical, certainly another, great contact to get in touch with.
Yeah, awesome, man. I mean, the people in our industry, digital marketing, agencies, typically pretty cool. So I definitely see that there are some great partnership opportunities between what you're doing and agencies that are operating all across the United States. So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for being on the show. Very, very excited to have you, our very first drug dealer on the show.
Oh boy.
I'm just kidding. I had to work that in there somewhere. I like to push the envelope, but no, seriously, man, I really appreciate you coming on. Very, very inspirational to me. And I'm sure that our listeners have gotten a lot out of our interview as well. So, to all of our listeners, thank you guys for tuning in today, and make sure that you return next Thursday and every Thursday for the next episode of Operation Agency Freedom. Bye, guys.